Well, a tricky day for Red Bull at the 2024 Formula One United States Grand Prix ends, almost inevitably, with Max Verstappen on pole position. But they really were, again, the story of the day, John. We had, as I'm going to come to you, the latest on bib gates, and then, Max pulling out a stunning qualifying lap. So let's talk about the controversy that rumbles on, first of all. What is the latest and what are the ongoing developments in the paddock today?
Yeah, so it's kind of just evolved a little bit today. We've heard from both Christian Horner and Zach Brown today in public for the first time. But they hadn't said anything before today. So Zach's come out kind of fighting and punching. He wants an FI investigation. He says if there's any possibility this device was used in Parc Fermé, then it's a breach of the rules. Wants the FI to look into it. It's pushing quite hard. Christian Horner has responded, says this is a distraction tactic. He says if you've got trouble in your own house, you light a fire in someone else's. Doesn't see it as a big issue. And I think one of the most interesting things was actually we learned some details about the device and how it was operated too. There's that video on Sky we saw of the FI looking in, and it's like a 2 foot long pole. It's got a little, at the very end I've seen a detailed photo of it. It's like a little Allen key that pops into the top of the thing. The mechanic accesses through a hole in the nose, all the way down to the cockpit. There's a panel underneath the heels. You pull the pedals out, pull the heel spot out, you go down and you twist it. So there's this belief from some people either that the driver could adjust it or even a mechanic, checking that the stewards aren't looking at him and the FI officials and makes a small tweak. Isn't the truth. It's a big, long tool. It's very obvious. The FI, as part of the policing for Parc Fermé, have CCTV cameras in the garages. So I think if this had been used in the past and blatantly, then I think it would be fairly obvious for people to look back and see it. So, but it's been there for 3 years. Is it something that wasn't used regularly, but occasionally if they were in trouble could be kind of rolled out? We don't know. So let's see where it goes. Some team principals kind of back Zach's view. The FI should be a bit stricter, should have the responsibility as a governing body to check that nothing untoward was happening. We want them to look into it. So I think that's the next step. The next step will be, whether there's a group of teams will push the FIA and President Mohammed Ben Sulayem to do a bit more digging.
Absolutely, and just worth saying, other cars checked, sort of just on the spot check, seeing what other teams are doing. That's not though the start of a formal investigation. That's just what the FIA is doing to see because these devices do exist on other cars. It's just a suggestion that the Red Bull one might have potentially been used between qualifying and Parc Fermé, which would be a big no-no. Yeah,
I think the difference is that if you look at a Formula One car, if you take a look at any photo of the bib, the kind of what we're talking about is an area hidden behind a shroud almost. There's hydraulic kind of rams that are kind of holding the floor in place. That gets altered because when you put a floor on, it's not this beautiful piece of engineering that kind of sucks in like a plastic model and it's all beautiful. It's kind of needs manoeuvring and locking in place and shifting around, and the front moves around. So there's a lot of positioning that takes place, a lot of adjustments, but a lot of these adjustments are done by teams with the covers off and fairly obvious what they're doing. Red Bull's unique in having this above the cockpit. They say, I asked Christian Horner today, I said, why is yours the only one in the cockpit? He didn't know. So this is what they've done, this is what has been set up. It's been there for 3 years. No one said anything until this weekend. Christian, distraction tactic, calls it paranoia, a bit frustrated, I think, that by all this noise. But I said to him, it reminds me a bit of the end of 2021. There was a lot of that kind of sniping going forwards. But I think I think he'll be quite happy though with a pole position, a great pole position as well, I think, from Max Verstappen. You've looked at the lap. How was it?
Absolutely. It's almost a shame that it's not an official pole position, quite frankly, because obviously just for the sprint race tomorrow, but you never know, we may be talking about exactly the same thing from Max Verstappen in 24 hours time. But yeah, essentially, he beat George Russell of Mercedes. We're going to come and talk about them and their upgrades a little bit later. But yeah, different approaches to SQ3, which is obviously they've gone to the soft tyres. We know there's a little bit of what's going on, dark magic Pirelli tyres. But essentially the Mercedes drivers ran early and Russell absolutely nailed it. Really sort of held back early on in the lap, gained massively on his previous time in SQ2. And come the end of the lap, was able to keep it all together. Red Bull running with the majority of the other cars at the end, Max Verstappen running with the majority of the other cars at the end of the lap, Sergio Perez not making it through, out in 11th in SQ2. And basically what happened, what the key difference was between Verstappen and Russell is that it's two things basically. Turn 1, Max is much better, particularly on the exit, gained significantly there and through the S's, the really amazingly quick high-speed section here at Austin. And effectively, he's nearly 1.5 tenths up on Russell by that point. Russell gains it almost all back, and in fact, he's ahead of Verstappen on the GPS trace data by the time they get to the penultimate corner. But here, Verstappen makes the critical difference, and he is excellent around this track, undefeated here since 2021, or since the COVID pandemic. But basically, he chucks the car in, much more committed. I mean, it's only a fraction, it's 3 miles an hour. He's closer onto the curb, where we saw Alex Albon hit that spin around in SQ2. And that's exactly where he gains just enough time back. They're almost identical through the final corner, and he's on sprint pole position. But still though, a good day for Mercedes. I think, well, for one of them anyway, for George Russell. Lewis Hamilton, quite frustrated. But that car, particularly having a lot of upgrades, they sort of held back. They realised that the big gap in between Singapore and Austin meant this was the perfect time to introduce a lot of upgrades. So what have Mercedes been saying about how they've been working?
Yeah, so they've had a strong phase for the summer break, then a bit of a wobble there, that spar floor that was on the car, then off the car, then on the car, then back off the car. But they said it's primarily due to freight reasons, that once it was off for Baku, it was off for Singapore, there was no way
Convenient
it could come back. So there's a new floor here, various upgrades to kind of bodywork, suspension, side pods, all those elements they're quite confident of. And George Russell says surprised themselves actually with that pace. He was pretty happy, but I think Lewis Hamilton, deep frustration from him that lap, he was 4 temps up, gets the yellow flag because Franco Colapinto spins, and it's only one shot, basically one shot in sprint qualifying. So that was the kind of the lap ruined. But I think pace-wise, it's fascinating, and I think George kind of probably spoke for both of them that they seem to be in the hunt for pole position and the race win here. I think one of the key things also was, from the other perspective, was that Ferrari looked really, really strong on the medium tyres. Potentially could have been Red Bull's biggest threat. But for some reason, when they all changed to softs for the final SQ3, pace just went away. Mercedes seemed to make the step that Ferrari couldn't make. I think you spoke to Pirelli, didn't you, and just talked a little bit about this transition to the soft and the difficulties it brings?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Pirelli's saying there's a few mistakes to look out for, particularly with the Ferrari drivers. But again, remember what I said about Max Verstappen at the S's and where he gained time. He's really strong there, and that was a particular weakness, it seems, on other cars when it came to the soft tyre in particular. But effectively, what Pirelli was saying was there was a ride compliance issue, very F1 engineer speak. But basically, essentially what they're saying is the soft tyre in those incredible high-speed corners through the S's, it's just moving around a little bit more. It's not just vertical compression, it's sideways as well, and effectively drivers are sliding more at that point. So if the car can cope with it, there's a lot of time to be had. At other points, it's just going to get away from them. So as you say, John, having to get through SQ1, SQ2 on the mediums, suddenly rocking up on the soft tyres, you've got a totally different thing to encounter, and that could catch them out. Also caught out McLaren, certainly with one of its cars, Oscar Piastri out in SQ1 due to track limits at turn 19, and Lando Norris only P4 with what he called a shocking lap. So he's struggling with the balance and the car setup all day. So yeah, I mean, considering it was sort of on the front foot when it came to, metaphorically jousting with Red Bull in terms of legality of cars on track and the very real results, a disappointing day for McLaren.
Yeah, they brought some upgrades here, but it's kind of hard to gauge how much they are. Lando said it wasn't really an upgrade properly because it hadn't seemed to make any difference. Car didn't feel any better. And there's an interesting line from Oscar Piastri to talk about the general pace of the car. It just says, it's not that we've got weaker, it's that others have got stronger, which is in a relative sport of F1. I'm just trying to work out what that means. So I think what he means is they've stood still, the others have made a step. So has the dynamic of the championship shifted? Has Red Bull found the answers they didn't have at Monza and Singapore was there? Is the front bib a big kind of red herring in terms of what's going on? And could Mercedes now kind of make that step that was there before the summer break and blow this championship fight wide open because suddenly there's an extra car in between the Red Bull and the McLaren?
Absolutely. Well, a couple of little things to note that we've picked up in the paddock this evening. Just looking ahead to the rest of the weekend, going to be much hotter, particularly on the main race day on Sunday. So therefore, what you see today, particularly in the long runs and everything when it comes to tyres, not necessarily representative. But actually, Pirelli quite surprised to see a lot of drivers out on the hard tyres in the only practice session, which means it's a nailed-on two-stopper. They'll only be able to use one set of hards. That could become critical for the cars that can keep those mediums alive. Well, we'll be back tomorrow to discuss the results of the first race, the sprint race here at Austin, and Grand Prix qualifying. Please join us then.